Okay, welcome back. We are going to be doing a brief review of the concepts that we have covered in the first half of our Intro to Java Computer Science. So the first thing I want to review is how to write a class. So I've created a BlueJ project, and I just called it Review. I might just delete this when we're done. We don't need it. We're just going to use it for review purposes. All right, let's make a new class. And I'm just going to call it Candle. Okay? And remember that a class, we've learned, should always begin with a capital letter. And then BlueJ has a bunch of this like example code. You feel free to use it. The sample method is not really that interesting, but it's just there to remind you and to make, to make it annoying. But I just hit Control A to select all and delete. And then public class candle. Now, right now, this is a fully functioning class in Java. Because Java supplies a default constructor that initializes all of your instance variables to their default values, which is like false for Boolean, 0 for numbers, and the keyword null, meaning just an empty object for any object types. Which, of course, we don't have any instance variables. I'd like to just make one instance variable a double called the height. Now, this would be a variable declaration right here. But we learned that we want to make our variables typically private. And the reason why we make our variables private is basically for a couple different reasons. One, it makes it to where working with other people works better. If you've ever worked with somebody trying to build something, you can get in each other's way. If y'all are cooking together, you can get in each other's way. You want to compartmentalize and say, look, you work just on the marinara, I'll work just on the pasta. You have your stuff, I have my stuff. When we're done, we'll put it together. It's that kind of thing. The other reason why we make our variables private is to prevent us from messing up, to screwing up our own code. So it's also a way of helping us not make mistakes. So now to set that value, we need to write what's called a constructor. And constructors are public methods. They're special because they don't have a return type. Notice that I don't have public void, public double, public int. I just have public candle, the name of the class. And then in here, sometimes we leave it blank. So let's say every time someone makes a candle, I want it to be 20 centimeters. And I added a comment. Those are 2 slashes for comment for centimeters, just something like that. So this would be if I want every single candle to be the exact same height. I don't want my users to be able to set it. If I want my users to be able to set it, then I need to have, I wrote candle. Should be height, sorry. So this sets this variable height. Please remember that when you assign your instance variables a value, that variable name must be to the left of the equal sign. Because assignment goes from right to left. I always wish they had just done it like that. Wouldn't that look cool? A little less than minus for an arrow assigning. If I write my own programming language, I'm going to use that. But they use equal sign. Now, if I want to allow my users of my class, or myself if I'm the user, to be able to assign a height, I need a different variable here. like h. And then I put h here. Now the purpose of this variable h, now it's a new variable, so I got to tell Java what it is. I got to tell Java, hey, it's a double, is to capture, to grab what the user types in, and then use that value and assign height. After the completion of this constructor, that h is gone. It's no longer usable. I am allowed to give it the same name as the instance variable, but I then have to tell Java that I want my object's height to be assigned, so I have to say this.height. I typically avoid doing that. It's good to know that that's a possibility, but I suggest you just do it like this. A different name here, I think it avoids problems. Okay. Now, let's talk about how to write a method. If you want to write a method that returns something, like, say, the height of the candle, you need to tell Java what it's returning. So, we make all of our methods in this class public. Yes, there could be a reason to make one private, but we're not doing that right now. It's just easy to remember that all our variables are private and all our methods are public. And then I can say return height. If you want to have a method that actually does some work, like burn, I can have a method that takes in parameters or not. And maybe the height will decrease by 1 centimeter when you burn it. This is void because it's not actually returning anything. Lastly, now it doesn't really make a lot of sense in this kind of silly example, but I want to review how to call a method within the class. So let's just pretend that we needed to burn twice. Okay? I can call the burn method simply like this. Because I'm in that class, I don't need to call it on an instance of class. I just call the burn method, and then when burn twice is called, it'll go down here, and then that'll go down there. One more thing that we haven't seen too often, but you will need in our project, is you need to know that you can return the value returned by another method. So, for example, maybe we wanted to write public double burn twice and get. And that method, what it does is burn the candle twice and then returns what get height does. So I could say return height, but I can also say return get height. And if needed, I could put parameters in there. So if you have to return something in a method, you can return the value returned by another method. Okay, next I want to talk about formatting. I want to review that. I think we've covered a lot. Then all we'll have to do is talk about making objects and array list, and I'll do that outside of this class. So, what if we wanted to have a method that describes our candle? Well, a method that is inherited by the object class. Every class subclasses object, which means every class has a toString. In fact, let me show you what I mean. So if I create an instance back on my workbench of a candle, say of a height of 20.0 or 20.10, if I right click on that, you'll see we have our methods available, but we also have some other methods, one of them being toString. you'll notice it says candle at, and then this is actually a hexadecimal number, so it's got numbers in the letters A through F in it, possibly. Yours are likely different than mine. It depends on just how it's created. This is actually a useful two-string in some really complex stuff we can learn about in a few years, but for us this is not that interesting, right? We want to have a better version. Just so you know, the two-string method is what is automatically called when you print an object. You'll notice that by printing it, it automatically returned what its two-string called. So we're going to fix that, and we're going to override this two-string method. So public string two-string, which will describe our candle. And I want to practice describing our candle using string.format. So I'm going to return a formatted string. So it's string.format. And I could just return the height of the candle, but I'm going to say this. I'm going to say height is, so when you do string.format, it creates a string. So you just put it in quotes. But anywhere that you want to have a formatted value, you can have a formatted string, a formatted int, a formatted floating number like a double. You put a percent sign, and I want a floating point, which is like a double, and I want it to be rounded to, let's say, 1 decimal. So I'll put 0.1. If I wanted 2 decimals, I'll put 0.2 or 0.3, whatever I want. So I'll say 0.1f. And then in your string.format, for every percent you have to have a parameter after it, and that's the height of the candle we're going to put there. Okay? So this should say height is, and it should be rounded to 1 decimal no matter how many decimals I put in. If I don't put in any decimals and it doesn't need to round it, it won't take that extra decimal. Because it's a double, though, it will always take at least 1. But if I want to make sure that I have 2 numbers, like I'm doing clock time, I would say like 0 point, and then that would make sure that it's 0 padded. Okay. But we're not doing that in this assignment today or this example. So I've compiled it, and then I could say new candle, and let's say the height is 13.234. And then you'll notice I now have two-string there, but I also have it here. So it's saying inherited from object, and also saying that was redefined or overridden in candle. And you'll see height is 13.2, so it did round it just the way I want. All right, now I'm almost out of the time that I promised to keep this short, but we're going to quickly review how to make objects in an array list. So we're going to make one more class, and I'll just call it candle test. Now, in order to use an array list, you either have to type out its full name, java.util.ArrayList, every single time you say it, or you can import it just once. Import java.util.ArrayList. Some classes are in java.lang, like java.lang.string. That is automatically imported for you. You don't have to import that. All the other classes that are in different, what we call packages, you have to import them like this. All right, and I'm just going to say public void test. And let's practice making an array list and making candles and adding them. So first, to make an array list, you say array list, and then you put what you want in it. If my array list is of numbers, then if you want them to be whole numbers, you have to say integer. You cannot say int, because array lists can only hold objects. The big difference between an integer and an int is that you must use dot equals instead of equals equals, because you can't use equals equals with objects. As well as you can't use less than, you have to use compare to. Let's make ours of type candle. Then candles is going to become an object. So we have to instantiate a class with the new operator. New, we're instantiating ArrayList. And you can put candle there again, but if you don't, Java will put it there for you. Just put the open, close, angle brackets, and then parentheses. Now I'm going to practice making a couple of candles and putting them in our candles array list. So to make a candle, I can say candle, like C1. So first, I'm making a variable. I have to tell Java what type it is. Is that how you spell candle? I'm just wondering if I've been spelling it right the whole time. All right, it doesn't look right. It looks weird. All right, candle C1 equals new candle. Now, our candle constructor, remember, requires a height. So I need to give it a height inside the parentheses. Let's make another candle. This one will be 33.15. Let's say that. And one more. I don't know. Just something like that. Now let's practice adding them to an array list. To add candles to an array list, you say candles.add. Candles.add. We'll add another one. Candles.add. Now let's talk about how to loop through them. I'm going to loop through and print them. So to loop through my array list, I use a for loop. For int I, and I want it to start at 0. I'll say I less than, I want to loop through the entire list. So I need to get the size of my array list. So I say candles.size. And I want I to increase by 1, so I say I++. Remember, a for loop has these 3 parts. And I'm simply going to print out each candle on a single line. That's system.out.println. And how do I get the ith candle? I say candles, my name of my list. And now, just like I called add, I say .get. And I put in the I. And since I will be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. through the entire list, up to but not including the size, that'll be perfect. Okay, so one more part of the project will be to be making a scanner to scan input from the user, and also making a scanner to scan a file. I don't want to take all the time to review scanner of a file and scanner of a user too much right now. But maybe I'll do a brief another review of that. But there's lots of information out there on how to use scanners. Remember, it's a java.util.scanner. I'll just show that right quick. If you want to scan in the user's input, I often call it KB for keyboard. And scanner, you have to put in parentheses what you want to scan. And if it's the user's input, say system.in instead of system.out that you're used to. Otherwise, you have to make a new file and put the file inside here. And that also can throw an exception. So that's a little bit different. We'll review that in our next little mini review. Do remember that the scanner has kb.next, kb.next int if it's going to be an integer, KB.next double if it's going to be a double. And these scan in. This scans in the next word. This scans in the next integer. That scans in the next floating point or double. So you'll be able to use those, but you'll need to make variables to store them. So if I wanted to catch that, I would say string.word. If I wanted to catch an int, I'd be like string.num. Here I'd be like double.num2 maybe. Okay? So that is pretty much it. You can test this program, but hopefully it works. Make an instance of it because we didn't make it a static variable. Void test. I don't see anything. Oh, because I have all these things it's asking me. Well, now I got to type in a word. Hi, a number 1, 19.0. There you go. And we could use those values to make our candles. Okay? All right, well, that's it for this part of the review.